Welcome to this video. This is Jeff from Brambletye Landscapes, and we fulfilled this job late 2018, early 2019. It was a winter job. We are based in Sussex in the south of England, so we're looking at temperatures throughout the winter of sort of 0 to 10 degrees Celsius. You're looking at rain, quite a bit of frost. We had some really deep frost on this job, so the little black tarpaulins, and you can see on top of that wall there, we actually drape them over every night to stop the frost getting into the freshly laid stuff. But there is a temperature below which we wouldn't lay. You put in your mortar mix, you put a winter mix, which is a kind of like a plasticizer, and that says on the bottle that you can lay it up to -5 degrees Celsius. We would never do that because we don't want to work in those conditions. And it just, if there is any compromise in the mortar, the client's not going to go to the manufacturer of the winter mix. They're going to go to us. So we always, on about 0, 1 degree, really 2 degrees actually, we won't be laying fresh stonework as a general rule. This is so this was about a 3-month job. This is one element of the job, but it's the key feature, the most visible. Generally, in a designed garden, this is designed, and I'll talk about the designer and the design a bit later on. But generally, you get some elements that are, aesthetically pleasing and practical, but they're not necessarily a feature. They're not. They don't stand out from the rest. Whereas this wall, just because basically it's vertical, it's just more visible, is most definitely a feature, and it's the kind of feature that we wouldn't make something as big as this that often. It really is an impressive. In all told, it's a. I know you can see a section here that's about 8 or 9 meters, but it's actually a 29 meter curved paddlestone wall. And a lot goes into putting this together. You can see there's a concrete footing, but where my feet are, that goes up about sort of 8 inches. The area I'm standing on will become garden bed. So what we did to make it workable was just fill it with sharp sand, so that we could walk around on it for the period of time we needed to. There's nothing worse than trudging through mud. So with the sharp sand, you can compact it down. It goes pretty hard. It's a good working surface, and you can put boards on it if you need to, if it does get a bit mushy. So we've got the concrete footing, which is curved and goes all the way around the 29 meter curve. And then we've built on top of that the blockwork, obviously, which is the hollow blocks you see behind. When we pull out and show you a wider shot, you'll see that there's a big lawn up behind at the top of that wall. It's a genuine retaining wall. It's not just to help get the height of the feature up. It is actually retaining, pretty much 12 acres of paddock behind, which is the client's property. So we had to make that hollow block wall extremely robust. Now, any kind of engineering buffs will know that the curve itself does really help with the structure. It's like an arch lying down, so it can take a lot of pressure from behind, as long as it's bound together well, because the curve does soak up an awful lot of pressure, and you can just see the lawn up the back there. We'll get better shots of that later. So I'll just digress while we're looking. This is the building site. We're doing all the elements in this section. There's the curved paddlestone wall to be. That's a gap in the middle where there's going to be some stairs, impressive kind of formal stairs going up. These are grey brick pavers that are going to be the path work. So that's the path edging there. And that's a raised sort of podium platform that brought us up to the height of the house. And this whole, garden is being fulfilled off a very tight design by a landscape designer. Who really just had a great eye for the space and got it really right. I mean, it's one of those designs when we tendered for it, the backyard was just a building site with a big mushy curved falling down bank and a huge bit of paddock behind it. And design, you can tell a good design sometimes, but sometimes you can't. And the space that we had to work with, we just didn't know how it was going to turn out. There's just so much to it, so many big elements. But as we got towards the end, we kind of realised actually this is a really great design and a really good use of the space. And I recommend to any landscapers, if you do get in with some designers, you have to develop a relationship with them. But I certainly recommend, going for designers who you think are good, whose work you want to do. So this was the first job we'd done for this designer, although we had done some work for a couple of other designers that she knew, which is why she got hold of us to tender for this job in the first place. But now when this designer contacts us, we are very keen to put in a quote for any jobs she contacts us, because we just know that we really liked the look of this garden once it was done, and it was it was a really good design. And it's good, and when you're working on something for 3 months, you want to be into it, and you want to be to think that it's a good thing that you're fulfilling. You wouldn't want to look at a design and go, not sure about this, and then be turning up to work in the winter for 3 months putting something together that you still get paid for it, but life's pretty short, and you don't want to be working on stuff that you're not into. This was an easy garden to get into and a really good design, and we loved this job, and we loved this client, and we loved the designer, and it was a really good job for us in many ways. It's not the sort of highest end of the budget scale in terms of the size of job we can do. I mean, we're a small company, but we've done jobs kind of twice the budget of this, 6-month jobs. But this is a kind of perfect size job for us, because it's 3 months, maybe 4 months, and then we move on. We don't get 8 guys on site. Most guys we have on site is usually 4 or 5, and most of the time it's 3 or 4. We like to fulfill the high end elements ourselves. That's why we're in landscaping, is to do that stuff. I didn't get into landscaping so I could sit in an office and hire other people to do the fun stuff for me. I wanted to be the guy doing this stuff, and I am the one doing this wall. We didn't necessarily draw lots, but you might wonder why there's only one person working on this paddlestone wall. And the main reason for that is that if you have 2 people working on 2 different sections, even if they're both as skilled as each other, they're going to look different. The sections will look different. There's no avoiding that. And it's not that one's better than the other. Everyone has their own sort of knack of how they're going to do it, and they are putting the stones in their way. And in fact, we did have a couple of days where I was off, and my business partner Justin, who's by far the more experienced landscaper of the two of us, he's been doing it pretty much his whole adult life. He did a small section because we needed to tie it in with something else he was doing at the end. And when I came back to work after the couple of days off, I looked at that section and it just stood out like a sore thumb. And he looked at it and said, "Yeah, I wondered myself, because does it look different?" I'm like, it actually did look completely different, even though there's no discernible reason why. So we had to take that little section out and get me to do it. And it really is just for the uniformity of the look. Once you get one person doing it their way, you kind of it's just a better finish to have that person go all the way through. So I spent about 12 days just laying these paddle stones, which was a big job and a big element, but it was pretty enjoyable actually. We're at the sort of height now where you can see when you're at the very bottom, it's quite easy to lay, and when you're about another block higher than where we are now in this bit of video, it's quite easy to lay. But when you're in this middle section, you're sort of half bending over the whole day. You're not sort of fully bending over or standing upright. And that's pretty hard on the back. That gets pretty tedious because you're sort of not quite able to collapse down into a full bend, and you're not spending much of your time upright. So we're just getting up towards the height now in this next couple of rows where there's not so much full bending over. So this is a good shot to show these block walls. The block wall in behind is made of hollow blocks. The original spec on the design was to have single skin blocks, a few laying down and then a few standing up on end. We just felt, well, we didn't quote for that. We just changed it on our quote. We said we would put hollow blocks in here for stability reasons, and the reason is that single skin blocks, which is just like a big fat grey brick, it's 10 centimeters by 22 by 40. It's the same dimensions as this, but not as thick. They don't have much structure to them. They take a lot of downward pressure, but they're not great with sideways pressure. And this 12 acres of paddock that this wall is essentially holding up the water from will put pressure on a wall. And again, when the designer puts in a single skin block wall, if there is a crack in the wall in a few years' time, the client is not going to call the designer; they're going to call us. So we felt like we wanted to make it absolute belt and braces. So those hollow blocks that you see that form the curve behind where I'm laying, they are all filled with concrete and rebar. There's rebar in about every second or third cavity, and then filled the whole way up with concrete. So that is basically each time you pour concrete through the hollow, it filters all the way through to the bottom and creates a single solid bar of concrete. So there's just no way this wall's going to move unless there's an earthquake. And that's really what you have to do if you're a landscaper. You've got to kind of look for things that say, what's the worst thing that can happen here? What's the problem that we want to solve before it happens? And being as robust as you can within the limits of the specs that have been given to you, and within the limits of the client's budget is really super important, because like I say, you're the one putting it together. You're the one who's going to get the phone call, and we just don't want those phone calls, and we don't get them generally because we do go the extra mile and make sure that our concrete footings are that concrete footing that we're laying everything on is about 50 centimeters deep, and it's filled with rebar. I didn't get any footage of that because I think there's quite a lot of footage of concrete footings already available on YouTube. The actual reason I started taking this footage was because before we did this job, I went on YouTube and I just looked for paddlestone wet wall. When I say wet, it means it's being laid with wet mortar. It's not a dry wall. And there just weren't any videos of the specific thing that we were going to be putting together. So I thought, well, I'll just take my camera and then I'll watch it. Watch it while I'm doing the wall, and if there's anything I can think of to improve the way I'm doing it, then I've got the video and I can refer to it. But actually, I was watching some of the footage after we finished the job, and my son was looking over my shoulder and he said, "Oh, you should put that on YouTube." And I said to him, I literally said to him, "What loser would watch this video?" And his reply, "You would, Dad." And I actually thought, you know what, I would watch this, and I was looking for one to watch, so that's why I'm putting it up here. It's one thing you'll notice, that it is a bit different to a normal wall because there's so many thousands of pieces. There's quite a lot of stone here, but you can only see the finished wall is only going to show one face of each stone. This is paddlestone. It's a quartz stone. We got this from CED in England, and so you're doing a lot of work just to get one little face on. So the face that you end up showing is, until we get to the top, and then it acts as a coping stone. The face is pretty important, and it's one of these things you can't rush. But another thing you'll notice is there's no string lines, and that's because it's on a curve. You can't curve a string. And so really a lot of this is done by eye, and people will be cringing saying, "Oh my God, Why would you do that? It's too risky. You should be setting up shuttering boards and using upright levels and what have you, which I've done before. And we've done enough of this to know that we know what we're doing. So we're kind of eyeballing a lot of it. We do have levels everywhere we go, checking the upright the whole time. A lot of doing this kind of wall is stopping, standing back and looking at what you've done and looking at it from a few different angles and saying, actually, that's starting to lean in a bit here, taking out a few stones and coming back. And if you don't do that, you'll end up with a big wave in there somewhere, or a big cavity, or a big flat spot that you just weren't concentrating on. And that's one of the challenges of a job this big, is that there's such a long run that a lot can go wrong. There I am just with a hammer just chipping out the back of some of these stones. The stones themselves, you can see I've put a lot of them up on the back wall, so I've just chosen ones that I think have a good face, and a selection of larger and smaller ones, so that if I have a cavity to fill, I've got one somewhere handy that's going to be about the right size. They're in piles over behind me on the ground, which is going to be patio back there. We made sure that we filled that with MOT and a bit of sand. It's not dirt. If you store them on the dirt, obviously you're going to have to wash each one off as you pick it up, because you can't lay mortar on you can't lay a dirty stone on a mortar, because the dirt will compromise the bond between the mortar and the stone. So the idea is to keep it very clean. That's the mortar being delivered. So it seems like quite a laborious process with just one guy doing it. I'm being fed mortar, and my aim was just to get through X number of rows per day. And you can't really bust this out quickly. You have to be methodical. You have to keep stopping and looking at what you're doing. But as I said, this was a very satisfying job to be part of. You can see the ends on the left here, of the left of shot, it's stepping up, and same on the right hand side, it's sloping down. And the reason for that is that the wall actually has to tie into elements that haven't been produced yet. You can see down this end it slopes down, and we have to eventually tie that in with a bit of path and steps that are going to be built over that side. There's my dog Smokey. So here's this side of the wall. Oh, this must be dawn, and we just got on site. Lovely sunshine there. Feeding the dog first thing. So yeah, the angle at the end is just so we can tie it in later. You can see I've got my big silver level there. Now, as you're going up, you don't have to have level lines running through. In fact, it's better if you don't. You've got different heights, and because you don't want to see big seams horizontally running through. But you do have to end up, when you get to the top, it all has to be level. So the idea is to keep it fairly level as you go up. You don't want to end up with... also, what you don't want is sort of diagonal lines or sloping tiles running through. You'll see a big seam if you have to correct a slope. You'll start to see the seam, and this is one of those walls, if you look at it for the first time when it's completed, you don't notice much, but as you sit there looking at it for day after day, I'm talking about from the client's perspective, you do see, you see it more intensely, you observe it more thoroughly, and you will start to see things that shouldn't be there if they're there. So our aim is to not have any sort of major discrepancies in how it's put together, not have any lines running through it, not have any big sort of seams that go up or down or diagonally. So it's just all a mass of, one nice face after another. Getting quite a lot of sunshine in these videos, which is not what I remembered. There was a lot of rain on this job. But, obviously, over a period of 12 days, we had, that was the section for laying this wall. So there I was with a tape measure, just checking the overall height, because obviously we had to, the wall was supposed to come to 1 metre high, and the stone bit, not from the ground up, from the footing up. And so just doing a sort of run through with the tape measure and the level, just to make sure I was getting close. So I've talked a little bit about the designer. Again, we just thought this design. It was really once we finished it, we got developed the sort of main appreciation of the designer, because when something's on paper and you're just looking at an open cavity, it's very hard to say, oh man, this design's amazing. It's really only once it's finished that you can go, yeah, this is really good. Um, the designer was really good for us because, if we came to her with a logistical problem or something that we didn't quite think was enough or was too much, then she was very amenable to just letting us sort of being guided by us and what, with our experience, we think should happen. And that's if you have a designer who's extremely rigid and says, no, I want you to do it completely by the book. In some ways that's easier because you just do what they want, but you don't always get the best result in terms of it's just some structural basics or some minor aesthetics that if they're open to just saying, or if they come to you and say, there's a problem here, what should I do? And they're willing to listen to what your ideas are, then it just makes for a much better work environment. The third element of the relationship is obviously the client, and these clients were just fantastic. They were a really nice couple. They had a business on site where the house is, so they were always there. And if we needed to just check in with them about anything, deliveries, timings, days off, whatever, they were just always really good. And they were a kind of tea making client, which we don't expect, but they would bring out a nice tray of tea twice a day, and you could almost set your clock to it. And again, we would never expect clients, and we always say to them, you don't have to make us a cup of tea if you don't want to. We're not here to drink your tea. But when someone does that, it does mean you can chat with them through stuff that's going on without having to go knocking on the door. We know they're going to come out about 10:30, and we'll be able to chat through little things that come and go, and that's really helpful. The other thing is that they obviously had the budget was right for them, but a lot of clients, we've quoted for a lot of jobs that have these paddlestone walls or very high value elements like this. But if the client wants to save a bit of money, usually you can lose a lot of your budget just by removing that element, by that one element. And people choose to do that if they're over budget, because they don't want to compromise several things when they can just change one thing, and then that brings them under. So something as high value as this, a paddlestone wall of this size, it's very easy for a client to not go ahead with it. But these guys, they just loved the design and the look of it. Now, there are going to be some landscapers out there who will be looking at this video and will have different ideas about how things could be done or maybe should have been done. And I have to be honest, this is we've done quite a few paddlestone walls, but not at this scale, and it's not something you do every week. The things we do the most of are patios, paths, fencing, some walling, retaining walls made out of oak sleepers and things like this. This type of element is something that I may not do on this scale ever again, really. I mean, it's not something that, and there are people who do more of this than we do. And that's the beauty of landscaping, is that, you're not just doing the same thing every day, but you don't get to become a sort of a craftsman, a high-end craftsman at one particular thing. What you end up having to do is become quite good at lots of different things. And I fully appreciate and accept that someone who does this primarily as their main job function would have different ways of doing it. I'm very happy with the way it came out. And by the way, another option is for us to hire someone in to do this, someone who's a stonemason or specialises in this. But we've got the skills to do it to a very high level. So, and this is kind of the reason why we get into landscaping, because you get to do things like this. I personally worked as a publisher for 10 years and sat at a desk, and at the end of every day I'd check my emails and I'd turn my monitor off and I'd look at my desk, and that was it. Walk away, and once a month the magazine would turn up, and I'd look through the magazine and go, "Oh, that's great, I made that." But after 100 editions of that magazine, the personal satisfaction from the work I was doing, was waning quite a lot. Whereas, but I'd always done landscaping here and there as a student when I was young, and then when I first arrived in England, I worked as a landscaper, and I did a lot of that over the years. And even when I worked freelance in film and television, I was always landscaping when I wasn't on another job. And I just always found at the end of the day, you could just look at something tangible, something real that was there in front of you that you had made. And I just found it way more satisfying than virtually anything else I'd ever done. It's just, I don't know whether it's just my personality that I like to have something that I can see that I've been a part of. I just found it very satisfying. Also, I feel like I've moved around. When I was a publisher, I had health problems like wrist problems. I had neck problems. I'm talking about sitting at a desk on a computer with my, typing on a keyboard all day. And these were real problems. Like I had a really stiff neck for years that required sort of physio. And it wasn't like I wasn't fit and healthy. I was very active, but just the position you find yourself in sitting at a desk, I was really unsuited to that. And it started to get me down. It was like I'm actually just turning into this person who's full of all these aches and pains. And I'd go off and do some landscaping with my mate, which is Justin, who became my business partner, who's in this video. And I just feel way more, way better about what I'd done that day. And physically, I just feel, much healthier. And I think the reason that, we're landscaping and the reason that I'm still doing this now, even years later, and the reason why we're running a successful business is because there is a level of pride and satisfaction that we find in, doing this. And it's one of those things, if you're not doing something properly, then you just shouldn't be doing it. And I think I felt the office work, I was starting to not care, as much about it as I should have. And that's no way to, to exist. That's no way to be. If you're not doing something that you enjoy doing, even if the money's good, eventually it will come back to, trouble you in some way, whether it was physical or mental. So for me, doing landscaping itself is just something I find, is a very holistically good thing for me, mentally and physically. But doing a wall like this, it did take it to another level, because the physical side of it was very, very demanding, lots of work, just small lifting, hundreds and hundreds of times a day, 1-2 kilo, sometimes half a kilo, laying them in, the bending over, the moving the stones around. It just was very, good physical. It wasn't, horrifically demanding, but it was very good. But just the sort of zen-like calm with which you have to kind of get yourself into to keep producing this day after day after day. And then to look at it every day when I uncovered it and just think, wow, I built that. And that's something that really has value. Someone's going to be looking at this for the rest of their lives at some point, and I will know. And gave it, every chance of being a really long-lasting garden feature. Well, here we are 2 years later, coming for a visit to take some video, check out the garden that's grown up. You might notice a detail here which is worth pointing out, that the wall enters the balustrade of the stairwell on the right side lower down than it does on the left side. This is because the the stairwell itself is centered directly opposite a set of double doors at the house, which is square to those doors, whereas the apex of the curve isn't offset to the doors because it's just bulges out a bit further to the left. So the wall hit the stairwell lower down, and we decided to tie it in with that sort of wrapping over the top feature there. Not to everyone's tastes, but we think it looks good. So here I am, just wrapping the video up. This was me coming to visit the client 2 years later, and they still love the garden. I did a bit of a tidy up, but it needed a bit more of a clean up than I had time to do to get it looking totally pristine. But the plants have all come up. The wall looks incredible. They love it. The dog, Smokey, was pretty happy to revisit. All looking really good here. So proud of this job. It's a really nice finish. I love these paddle stones. I wish we could do more of them. But as I said earlier, they are a pretty premium feature. So it's not so much the materials, which are expensive, but it's the labour as well. It's pretty intensive. A lot of work to put them together. But it looks really good with all the plants coming up, giving us some softness around all the connections between the wall and the patio and the paths. Very nice design, very good finish, and one happy client. No, I don't have a drone. That's just me standing on the wall. Here you actually see the top of the wall, which we use the paddle stones as coping, and I didn't get much footage of that, and it's just pointed in between them. Simple way to do it. Looks good.
Sometimes, essentially, it's quite hard to tell. I like the design.